In tonight's pre-election segment, we turn to the race for state representative in the 14th Suffolk district, currently represented by Angelo Scaccia. The district includes parts of Roslindale and West Roxbury and most of Hyde Park, including Reedville. Our guest is one of the challengers in the Democratic primary on September 4th. We'd like to welcome Gretchen Van Ness. Thank you much for being with us, Gretchen.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Gretchen, you have a background in some community advocacy, some neighborhood activism, so tell our viewers a little bit about that.
Well, I've had an amazing experience as a civil rights attorney and activist, and also working always in the neighborhood that I've lived in. And so before moving to Hyde Park, I was president of the Hyde Jackson Square Main Street organization in Jamaica Plain, in the Latin Quarter of Jamaica Plain. But I've also worked on a lot of different issues like marriage equality, in bringing marriage equality to Massachusetts, working on the St. Patrick's Day Parade case when I was attorney, and now living in Hyde Park. I participate in the annual Neponset River cleanup. I participate in the Keep Hyde Park Beautiful efforts that are just doing a fantastic job, support the main streets in Hyde Park as much as I can. And I'm also very active in the Fairmont Hill Neighborhood Association and helped form the zoning committee there so that we can work on protecting the neighborhood and making sure that people comply with our zoning code.
What has that experience taught you about dealing with the rest of the legislature, were you to be the one getting in there?
Well, I'm glad to say that when I was president of the Women's Bar Association, I was very active in the Legislative Policy Committee. So I've been on the Hill many times to lobby for our legislative agenda, but also to testify about things like opposition to the death penalty, for marriage equality, and things like that. And I've had a chance to meet a lot of good people who are really trying to do their best for Massachusetts. We just need lots more of those people in Beacon Hill, and that's one of the reasons that I'm running, because I really think that, especially at this time in our country's history, we need to have state legislators who are willing to step up and do everything in their power to help protect Massachusetts and the people who live here. And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to being able to do.
One thing you're concerned about is a Community Preservation Act, which is supposed to provide money for things like affordable housing, historic preservation, in open space. How do you see that playing out for this district?
Well, I was so happy when that law passed in 2016. So the referendum passed, and it created a small surtax on property transfers and on our property taxes. And this law is now generating $20 million a year to be used in Boston, precisely for the reasons that you said, for affordable housing, for green space and recreational space, and for historic preservation. And there were forums all around Boston in every neighborhood to tell people about this money that's available, how to apply for grants to help your community in all these areas. And there wasn't a forum in Hyde Park. And I went to the forum in Jamaica Plain, and I was like, how do we get this in Hyde Park? And luckily, we were able to bring the forum there a couple of weeks ago. And I'm very, very excited about the potential for this new fund of money to look at housing and historic preservation and green space all together in a way to protect middle-class housing, to expand the availability of middle-class housing, and to expand the definition of affordable housing. So if we can use this money to develop historic places, like where there's a light industrial area, there's an old mill building or a brewery building. We don't have to depend on a private developer to come in and put in a certain number of luxury condominiums so they can afford to have some affordable condominiums. This is public money to be used for that kind of development. And so this is potentially transformative for every neighborhood in Boston, but in particular for Hyde Park and the 14th Suffolk District in Roslindale and West Roxbury, which is just now beginning to feel the pressure of development and the pressure on housing prices and apartment prices and the rents going up. And here's a fund that can help stabilize the housing market for us and invest in housing for people, the real people who live and work in Boston, and the families that live and work in Hyde Park and want to stay there.
This is a district that does have some underused land near transit areas such as Reedville, where you could put a lot of housing, but at the same time people say, my gosh, there's so much traffic there. How can we handle that?
It's true. This is why we need community input and a lot more community control over development in every neighborhood, but especially in the 14th Suffolk District. So the more that we can have community involvement, the more that we can manage change in a way that preserves the community in the way that people enjoy it now. And for example, if there is going to be development around Sprague Street and Reedville, how do we have the developer help upgrade the infrastructure there. There's an old bridge that everyone has said and knows has been inadequate for decades now. So there's a lot of things that need to change. So we need to work in partnership with the people who want to bring change to the district and to Hyde Park, but also be really smart and involve the community in how this is going to happen too. So I firmly believe that we need to invest in our infrastructure across the district, across Boston, much more generously, and really look to the future. How are we going to grow, and grow in the smartest way possible, the most inclusive way possible? And that's what leadership can do.
We have changes in store on the U.S. Supreme Court that could end up reactivating an old state law that criminalizes abortion. Some legislators want to do something about that right away. What would you like to do?
I think that that's necessary. So it's Chapter 272. It's actually, the name of the chapter is Crimes Against Morality and Chastity. So these are old laws that are not in effect, but not only criminalize abortion, but also criminalize adultery, things like that. So the good news is that because of a Supreme Judicial Court decision in Massachusetts, safe and legal abortion is protected under the state constitution, not just the federal constitution. So we have an extra layer of added protection here in Massachusetts, but we should definitely get those old laws off the books. There's no reason for them to be here. But I'm also reminded that even after the Supreme Court decided Loving versus Virginia, it took a long time for many states to strike the laws against interracial marriage from their books. This is a kind of a housekeeping thing that we should do, and we should also be really transparent on the Hill about what we're doing and when we're doing it and why, and that would help people voice their support or opposition to what we're doing.
One other issue in this district, some people with dogs want a place in some open space where they can run off leash and enjoy the open air. Somebody says, no, we shouldn't have that. What would you like to see? I think there's a location near the Stony Brook Reservation.
There is an amazing location, potential for a place in the Stony Brook Reservation. It's been stopped by the incumbent, and I have already met with the dog park people and many of my neighbors and people in the district. This is going to be a dog park that's usable by everyone around the district, and promise that the first bill I'm going to introduce as a state representative will be the bill that permits that dog park to proceed, the planning and building of that dog park in Stony Brook Reservation. It's an outstanding proposal that this volunteer group has put together, and it deserves to go forward.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Gretchen Van Ness, candidate for state representative in the 14th Suffolk District.